Good afternoon. My name's Tim Markle. I'm Director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Health Care Needs. Welcome to Hope for the Holidays 2021 edition. We are excited that you have either joined us in person or on recording. Today, we have Alyssa Walsh. Alyssa is a licensed psychologist at the Weisman Center, provides focused behavioral intervention services for children and adolescents with autism spectrum disorder and their families in the autism treatment program. And she's going to give us some helpful hints on preparing for and navigating transitions and changes in routine. Alyssa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to come and joining today to talk a little bit about this upcoming winter break. And as you noted, transitions and changes that often accompany this time of the year. And as Tim said, I really do, please feel free to write in the chat or unmute, whatever anybody feels most comfortable with any questions or comments or ideas that you found that work well for your family or for yourself as part of this as well. I would love for it to be to include discussion as much as folks would like as well. So I will jump right in. All right. So I wanted to just kind of start with defining transition, only because everybody thinks about transitions in different ways, right? And there's so many different types of transitions that people experience. And there's transitions that kind of happen on macro levels and micro levels. And so I just wanted to kind of ground in by identifying that, transition is generally we consider it to be a passage from one state, stage, subject, or place to another, or kind of stopping one activity or something and beginning another. And as we all know, transition periods usually involve at least one, if not multiple, aspects of change, which might also include changes in routines of some sort. And we all experience periods of transition in our lives and in our days. And we all experience times in which we have changes in our routines. And some of them might be ones that we're really excited about and really looking forward to and have planned for, right? And there are certainly times of transition and routine changes that we're not looking forward to and that are not so pleasant, right? And that's the case for all of us. And I just included here a few different examples of times of change just to see, to kind of capture how we think about these in different ways. And of course, today we're going to focus on winter break, but transition periods can include kind of really big macro changes or transitions, like a big move, right? From changing from one place to another, a new city or a new home that involve changes in routines, perhaps in terms of getting things packed up and the days in which we need to travel to this new place and unpack and starting a new school or new employment. We also sometimes talk about change and transition in terms of healthcare, right? From pediatric care to adult care, or on kind of a more micro level, day to day, we might experience changes in our routines when we have an appointment of some sort that we just don't usually have each day, whether that be a dentist appointment or a haircut. And then, of course, school itself involves a variety of different changes, including starting a new school year, starting in a new school, if that, from elementary school to middle school, moving from in-person to virtual learning and back to in-person learning. Those are all times of transition and change. And then, of course, as we'll talk about today, breaks from school that include the winter break, the spring break, the summer break. And so all of these kind of times involve periods of transition and often changes in our routines. In addition, holidays themselves over the course of the year, for most families, or many families, I should say, involve some type of activities that might be different than our day-to-day experiences, right? And so the winter break has a number of holidays that families may celebrate that might involve some of these kind of changes to our routines that we might have on a day-to-day basis. And then I just wanted to note too that, again, transitions really happen every day, many, many times a day. If we were thinking about kind of stopping an activity and starting another one, there's multiple that I experienced, like first thing in the morning, right? From getting up, having transitioned from being in my nice warm bed to getting up to going to maybe eat breakfast, right? And from stopping eating breakfast to making my lunch for the day. All of those are kind of changes and transitions that happen on a day-to-day basis as well. So as I noted, change occurs for everyone. And while there are certainly changes that we might really be excited about, might be positive, something we're really looking forward to do, there are also changes that we're not looking forward to do, that are hard. And also the process of change itself, right? Even if it's something we're looking forward to, the process of it upcoming or anticipating that upcoming can be hard, and to be hard to kind of navigate all of what is about to happen and what is expected. And we know and I know from talking with many individuals on the spectrum, that these times of transitions and changes in routines can increase stress and anxiety, as it can for everyone in different periods and at different times, right? And we know that there are different aspects through talking with autistic individuals and kind of what they shared, that sometimes having and preferring a greater need for predictability of what is upcoming, right? What is expected of me? What am I going to need to do? What are the things that somebody's going to ask of me? Knowing when the thing that I'm currently engaged in needs to end, and kind of trying to reduce some of those unexpected disruptions. All of those kind of areas can be sometimes more stressful. And so we really want to be thinking about these perhaps this upcoming winter break, and what different aspects of change and routine might be happening for our family, and for us to think about these aspects from the perspective of our children, in kind of our children and our family, and how that might impact them, right? And how can we best be thinking about these upcoming changes and preparing for them, right? In relation to the winter break. It can also help us to understand why are routines really beneficial, as they provide more predictability. They provide a really clear outline for what is coming next or later in the day. I know that's something that I always seek too, and it's always helpful to know what is upcoming, what's going to happen. And having more routine and predictability decreases the chances that there might be an unexpected change, right? The more we can plan for and build in those routines, the more helpful that can be to reduce unexpected changes, though we know that, that they do occur at times. So there are a few different areas that might be helpful for us to be thinking about for this upcoming winter break from school. And somehow it is the middle of December. I'm not quite sure how we got there at this point, but it is. And so winter break is approaching here really quickly. So there are three kind of areas that I thought might be helpful for us to talk a little bit more about, and thinking about, for our families in each of these areas, what might change, right? And what might be staying the same. Because we know everybody's winter break plans and holiday plans are different. And the other thing I should note too right away is, in kind of talking together about strategies, we always wanted to be thinking about what is going to reduce stress for the entire family, right? Not trying to think about implementing strategies that are going to increase stress. That is certainly the opposite of what we're hoping to do. So what can be helpful to reduce stress kind of during this particular time? So of course, daily schedules are going to change, right? During a winter break, being out of school, we're used to during the weekdays having a really structured, generally school day, right? And activities where our child or teen or adult is involved in those activities. And so thinking about, okay, what are we going to do during those times? What's going to take place during those weekdays where generally we're in the school setting? And then also think, and of course that happens on the weekends, but this will be for an extended period of time. The other piece we want to think about and prepare for are there going to be transitions or changes related to holiday activities that our family will be participating in? We want to be preparing our child for who they're going to be around. Where are we going to be? What can we expect will occur during holiday activities or winter break activities in general that we might be planning for as a family, right? And then the third piece of it is the home environment. That also, for many families, can be a source of change that would be beneficial to be thinking about and planning for over the winter break, especially in relation to the holidays. Are there any decorations that your family has or plans to put up around this time of the year? And how does your child usually respond or kind of navigate having the home environment change in these different ways? Some of the other aspects of the home environment during different holiday periods that sometimes we don't think about right away are things like lighting, right? And changes in smells based on what we're cooking or making around this time of the year. And kind of how has that gone in the past, and how can you plan for that? And so we're going to talk about that just in just a second. And I'm actually going to sneak down here. And I just want to jump in right away. So let's talk about kind of tips that that might be useful to think about, right? And not that any one is going to necessarily be the right fit or perfect fit for each person, but can kind of get us thinking about what would be helpful for our family and for our children, and thinking about this upcoming winter break. So one important strategy in trying to reduce uncertainties in what is upcoming and what somebody can anticipate during an activity is to foreshadow. Foreshadowing upcoming changes in schedules and routines. Again, both thinking kind of on a broader level for what are the maybe holiday events or activities that our family is going to participate in this year, as well as kind of on a more kind of day-to-day basis of what are the things that are going to happen in our day-to-day when we are in school during these particular periods of time outside of holiday activities. Now, for some folks, foreshadowing changes further in advance and then continuing to review the upcoming winter break schedules and plans from school on a regular basis prior to it happening is beneficial. For others, bringing up changes shortly before they occur is best. And you know yourself or your child best to know kind of in what way would foreshadowing be most useful for my child or for our family. And there are, as we know, multiple ways that we can foreshadow what these changes are going to be and what that's going to look like. Of course, talking about that ahead of time in a verbal fashion, but it also can be helpful for many folks to have these different types of changes in plans or schedules reviewed in a visual format. And if you think about that, one of the reasons that we've heard that can be helpful for many folks is that our words, when we say something like what's upcoming, what are we going to do, what's going to happen, our words go away. I just said a bunch of different things and it doesn't last, right? But a visual, it does. We can go back to it. We can go back and check in on it, or it can be used as a reminder of different ways. Or let's say when I was kind of talking with somebody about what's upcoming, there were other things happening, right? That we were thinking about or that were happening in the environment. Or maybe I gave this whole long list and the first two were heard, right? And so a visual really can help to have a place for our words to stay, if that makes sense, kind of over a longer period of time as well. And visuals and foreshadowing that can take a lot of different kind of facets, including a calendar that kind of outlines what are some of the bigger, if there are bigger activities or events that folks are, or I should say not necessarily bigger, but that might be a bigger change from a day-to-day activity that we highlight on that calendar. It could also be, and I have some examples upcoming of like a daily checklist, right, of what are the things that we plan to do in our day, as well as for any activities that are new or novel or haven't happened for a while. For some kids, using a social story to kind of pair together words and pictures for what's going to happen, who's going to be there, what are we going to do, and where are we going to go as part of that. The other piece of foreshadowing, kind of outside of routines and schedules, is to think about foreshadowing who will be present for any holiday activities or events that we are going to, or that we're participating in person or virtually. And then the other piece of it that I know in both Jen and Erin Thompson's presentations that they've talked about, and that I think is really important, is thinking together as a family ahead of time. What are the expectations that we have for our family for the holidays, to make it as joyful of a time as possible? And what are the expectations that we have for our child as part of any holiday activities as well? And then we want to make sure that we're talking about that together with our child, right? So that they know what that's going to be ahead of time, and including them as much as possible in these discussions, and kind of planning for all of these changes is, of course, really important as well. Let's see here. And then thinking too about, again, the environment. Are there certain places in our home that we incorporate change, and maybe related to decorations, right? And are there other places that we leave the same? And kind of what might be be best for our particular child. So the other,
Alyssa, can I just one more? You just made me think of the fact that I think it was a family I was talking to. I can't remember, but they would. The thought was that the decorations and the lights and everything can sometimes be overwhelming, and so there's can always be that place in the house that doesn't change.
yes,
You know, that doesn't get decorated. That there's no Christmas music allowed here. That
Yep.
it's the same.
Yep.
And so that can be incorporated as a sort of a touch point for the kiddo. And then going back to what you were saying earlier, that what we're talking about is trying to make this as less stressful for the family.
Yep.
Is we know that emotions flow freely
Mhm.
between people. And so even if we do everything exactly that we might need to for our kiddo, but we are super stressed out, it's still going to affect the environment. And so taking care of ourselves, that our plans that we're making are as less stressful for us too, so that what we are doing works for our family. I really love the way that you put that, is that it's something that's going to work for everyone in
Yep.
the family.
Yep, absolutely. And kind of taking that kind of holistic picture, of course, our children as well, and then kind of from a family perspective, as we want this time to be as joyful and as reducing stress as much as possible, which I know can sometimes be the opposite of what happens during the holidays, right? For many families. And then to exactly what you just noted, Tim, is kind of thinking about where are the places or the areas or the routines wherein if there's change happening in lots of other places in terms of holidays activities or events or other, kind of other winter break activities that are occurring. Is it possible to maintain as much of kind of consistencies with other parts of our day as possible to keep in as much of predictability and routines that we all find at times to be really comforting, and knowing exactly what can we expect as part of those. And then that is also, as you said, spaces, right? Are there particular spaces that we can maintain in that consistency and kind of for ourselves, for our children during this particular time as well. Another kind of strategy that can be useful for some families to think about when there are deviations from general schedules and when some of the usual activities will not occur, for example, like school activities are not able to happen, is to think about how does our child, or how do we do in more unstructured environments, right? In more unstructured days, right? For some kids and for some families, that's great. And that's awesome. And that works really well. And for other kids and families, that actually can sometimes serve to increase stress and to make things a little bit more difficult for, what is going to happen and what is going to take that time in the day that school activities might usually be going on. So for some families, building in structure when there isn't as much kind of on a non-school day can actually be really helpful for some families. Not suggesting that every minute of every day and all downtimes have to be planned. Definitely not that. But is it that we think about what are the times, what is our morning routine? And does that stay the same? And then are there different periods that we kind of build in downtime or quiet time or outside time or family time? Would that be helpful? Would that be helpful for our child to think about, okay, these are the times of the day. This is what I can kind of expect. This is this is when I have my, get to watch a movie at this time, right? And kind of having some of that plan too, to try to decrease, again, the ambiguity or unpredictability around what's going to happen in our days and what's all going to be asked of us as well. What else did I want to mention on that note? Oh, the other piece of it too is, I know we talked about visual supports during the winter break, visual schedules. The other type of visual that can be helpful for some families and to consider are timers or clocks, or when there is an activity in which there is an amount of time that we're hoping to participate in it for, right? How do we let somebody know what that goal is or what that expectation is for doing something? Maybe we're all gonna, our hope is that we're gonna spend 15 minutes at the dinner time table together, right? Or that we're gonna bake cookies for a short, 10 minutes. If we have a certain kind of goal frame in mind, how do we let somebody know that? And and what does time mean? Time is so abstract. And it's so natural and so common. I find myself needing to kind of remind myself of this all the time. It's so natural to say, okay, somebody asks me when something's going to happen. I'll say, oh, just a minute, or give me in a little bit, or in a little while, right? And sometimes that means in 30 seconds that's going to happen. Sometimes that means in 30 minutes, and sometimes it means in 2 hours, right? And so when we are thinking about time and when something's going to happen, to the extent that we can, thinking about kind of all coming together for how long, when will that happen, or how long will that be? And using timers and clocks can be really helpful for that particular purpose, for keeping everybody on the same page, right? And reducing ambiguity and unknowns around when am I going to get to when am I going to watch that really awesome movie that I'm excited to do after we finish this family activity? And so kind of those types of visuals in the environment for some kids can be really helpful as well. And there are, I'm just going to sneak down to this one real quickly. For each person, depending on where they're at with learning for time, it can be a clock, it can be a visual countdown timer to see kind of when the color is all gone, that means something's going to happen, or I'm finished with this current activity. And then here are a couple other examples of different options for checklists. Again, it doesn't have it. For each family, it might look a little different. Having sometimes a really structured schedule is most helpful, and other times it's not. And having kind of broader activities outlined is more helpful as well. The last point I had on here is, again, thinking about how do we help make time as concrete and predictable as possible. And that's where the time or the clock piece of it comes into play. Let's see here. Oh, and then, sorry, the calendar idea. And then on the right is just kind of an example of how, again, a social story could be used or made for what is upcoming, especially if there's something that's new or that we haven't experienced for a while, to kind of prepare for that as well. Let's see here. All right. So, whoopsies. Am I frozen? Just froze up on my end a little bit. Nope. Okay, we're good. Thanks, Tim. So we talked a little bit about planning and preparing, right? And kind of foreshadowing, and how can we do that in different ways. And the other thing that we want to be thinking about is, as we know, changes in routines and transitions can be stressful. So we want to ensure that each person and each child has a way to communicate that this is too much, right? This is too much. This is overwhelming. I need a break. I need some space. That's important for all of us to have that to communicate to other people if we're feeling those ways, and especially too during times in which things might be different, which can be more stressful during maybe holiday events or activities. And so we want to make sure does our child have a way to communicate that, and that when they do, that's honored and respected right away, and that they can have that time and that place and that space to kind of decompress and kind of help to try to support calming in those situations. And what that way is to communicate, again, is different from person to person. It might be a verbal way. It might be a card that we can kind of tap or use as like, I need a break. It might be a device and kind of teaching and practicing, I need a break on a device. It might be a sign. It might be sign language, or it could be kind of a sign that you as a family decided this is what it means, and this is going to work for us. And if my child gives that sign, it means, okay, where are we going to go? We need a little space. We need to kind of go and find something fun or kind of decompressing to do at that time. And then the other piece of that is, what are those activities, especially if we're with other people that we're maybe not as often with, or we're in an environment that is not our home. Where is that space going to be, and what are those activities, right? And so it might be that at times we kind of prepare for, are there different coping strategies or calming strategies that involve materials that we need to bring with, right? Are there favorite activities? Are there other favorite items that kind of serve that purpose? And do we bring those with, and or do we check with folks ahead of time if there is a bedroom or a space that we can go into if that's needed, and or we plan in breaks for that to happen too, if we think that can be useful for our child. I know I have just one picture on here. I probably have said this 13 times, but again, it's really important that what that calming routine is for each person is so different. So what does that look like? What are some of those activities for ourselves or for our kids? And how do we kind of teach and practice and make sure that that's available during the holiday activities as well? The other piece that I wanted to note is we always want to be mindful in remembering that behavior is a form of communication. We all communicate in different ways, right? We communicate, some folks communicate with their words or sign language or gestures or a device. And also behavior and getting upset is a way of communicating something. And we want to be thinking about what is that, right? What is somebody communicating? Does it mean that I need something? I need somebody. Something is too much. It's overwhelming. I don't want something to happen, right? And be thinking about what is that communication message and how can we make sure that that person has, each person has a way to let us know that in a really comfortable way for them, right? And that's available kind of across the settings that we're in. And then last, but certainly not least, is how do we keep highlighting and kind of keep focusing on what's going well, and what are those areas in which my child is putting forth lots of effort and kind of and being present for this activity, or kind of trying out or letting us know that they need a break, or engaging in different activities. Let's keep continuing to find what's going really well. And highlighting those is always important to be doing for all of us. In addition,
One of the things that we used to do for my son, he's on the spectrum, and
Mhm.
so when we would go over to families for holidays, is we always made sure that he knew that he had an out,
Yes.
so to speak,
Yeah.
because families can get really overwhelming really quick, and we can, we get into discussions, or we start to want to play games, or we start talking about stuff that just, he's not going to engage with. And so there was always, like you suggested, there was always that bedroom that he knew that he could go and either read, or that was a good time for him to watch whatever TV show he wanted to watch, because then he didn't have to watch what I wanted to watch. And it didn't mean that we then isolated him. When it was time for that family game, we brought him back in and we had him interact, and he had dinner with us. So it wasn't like a night, but he just needed that break.
Yep.
From people,
Yep.
from the noise, from all that stimulation.
Yep.
And so we just would always make sure wherever we're at that he knew he had a place to go.
I really like that, Tim. That sounds like that worked really well for your family, and and having that space and knowing where that's going to be, and having those things available that he really enjoyed and that he really liked, like a book or watching a show. Absolutely. And for some folks too, it might be taking a walk outside, right? Like what does that look like, and how can we make sure that's available? Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. So actually that kind of I have some resources and kind of websites listed here, but overall that kind of wraps up the presentation part of it.
So Alyssa, the other thing that I couldn't help thinking about when you were at the beginning, going back and talking about, make sure your kid understands what's coming up next, and maybe plan out, and a bigger calendar with maybe this picture of Aunt Martha that we're going to go see, so he knows who it is. But that whole sense of I'm thinking to myself that if I had done that, which I didn't when they're younger, that's a great idea. Boy, wouldn't it have been a good technique to keep me on track about what was coming up, and then help me prepare, because things can pile up, and then all of a sudden you're at that day that you have to go somewhere, and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot all about this. Mm-hmm. And so this is just another helpful way that if we are trying to communicate to our children what's coming up and foreshadowing, it's a way that we can remind ourselves and can help keep our stress down, because then we're not going to be surprised by these last minute things. It can help us plan our time and plan out how we want to prepare and where we're going to go to next. So again, it's helping that whole family system. I like that.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point as well, Tim, thinking about our children and then our whole family, and kind of how that can be helpful overall. Absolutely.
Any questions, any other suggestions of what people have done for navigating the transitions and changes in routine? Please, we would love to learn from each other as well. You can use the chat or feel free to unmute. We'd love to hear from you. And we also know we have made these deliberately short so that people can still enjoy part of their lunchtime or whatever they might be having to read this or listen to this. And I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'm not seeing anything come up in chat. So Alyssa, I just want to thank you so much for taking time out to come here. This is just some fantastic reminders, even for me, even though my son is now an adult,
Yep.
that I can't assume that, you know, that today is the day that his wiring is going to match with my wiring, because gosh darn no, my wiring doesn't match with a lot of people's wiring. So that sense of communication and preparing and thinking ahead, what can I do to make this less stressful, are just some really wonderful thoughts. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And thank you. These reminders are important for myself and kind of thinking about my family too, and the upcoming winter break and holidays. So they can be
exactly. Yeah, that's what I really love about this is, you know, we do these series and it's just like, oh, wait, I need this. This isn't really about my kid. I could use this. So thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and thank everybody for joining us. If you get a moment, please go ahead and fill out a feedback form so we know what we should be doing in 2022. We appreciate you being here, appreciate your feedback, and Melissa, really appreciate your time as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.